Digital growth marketing has changed. What's working today won't work tomorrow. That's why having an omnichannel approach to growth is your next best move. As marketers, we hear both multi-channel and omnichannel as a term thrown around quite a lot. Let's actually dissect what's the difference between the two and how they're related. A multi-channel marketing approach is focused on using various channels to launch and have your campaign running, but it's a segmented approach at the channel level. So when you have a campaign running, you see the campaigns as individual, so they're very siloed in your perspective, even though you might have multiple channels. Whereas an omnichannel marketing approach sees all the different channels as a holistic strategy, i.e. they're interconnected in terms of their approach. They might have different messages, different campaigns running with different channels, but they have one unifying purpose or one goal, and they're kind of seen as one whole marketing. An omnichannel marketing approach is an interconnected way of approaching different channels, whereas multi-channels is seeing channels as one, using multiple channels. Omnichannels is using multiple channels, but having them have one purpose or one goal. How to approach an omni-channel strategy as a digital growth marketer. You first need to practically understand where the business is at. So understanding, do we have the right product for the right audience? Is it the right time to deploy this omni-channel strategy? Is there a product market fit already? Or are we still trying to figure that out? What's the budget we're going to use? Do we even have a budget to test out different campaigns and different messaging if this omnichannel approach is actually scalable and if it's sustainable? Next is understanding if your product or business that you're advertising is actually ready for an omnichannel approach. Because when you have an omnichannel approach, there's a sense of a mass audience outreach. And if your product isn't quite ready, it's gonna fail. So what that means is if you're a software company, you know that there's a lot of bugs and there's a lot of errors within your app, but then you have an omnichannel marketing campaign running. You have all those floods of users coming through, and then imagine all of them complaining and figuring out that there's so many issues with the app. That's gonna have a very bad effect for the app, for the business. And there's a saying in marketing, you can't change first impressions. So understand practically if your product or business or service is ready for a mass outreach and if it's ready for an omnichannel marketing strategy. Next one is be able to understand and be able to visualize or mind map the channels you're going to use, what channels are relevant, what channels have you tested out before, and what channels can you potentially test out as an experiment. Whether that's social media, email, CRM campaigns, PR, newspaper, radio ads, or even audio advertising ads, podcasts, for example. Understand if you even have the assets for that and be able to visualize what that looks like in terms of activation, not just the planning aspect. Next one is understanding historic context of what's been done before. So especially if you're starting with a startup, they haven't tried out too many campaigns or they haven't tried out any specific channels, or maybe they've just tested a few. Be able to understand what channels and campaigns you deployed before, and with those channels, what actually worked, what didn't, and are we willing to test out new channels or campaigns or even marketing messaging moving forward, or at least for this next campaign. Next one is actually probably the first point I should have made before deploying an omnichannel marketing approach or an omnichannel growth marketing approach, is actually understand what's our messaging and how is that messaging going to be deployed through the various channels we're going to deploy. And that fundamentally stems from the brand as well, or the particular product or service you're releasing. Be able to understand how we do communicate that with our ideal customer persona. But in essence, you need to know what your messaging is, because that's going to dictate the goal of the campaigns, and it's going to dictate the type of audience you're going to target within the various channels, and obviously how you're going to message to those particular users. And just to extend that point, be able to understand if this particular campaign will have any incentives, if it's going to be focusing more on a promotional approach. Is there a new product feature coming out? Are there new services? Are you improving the services? Be able to highlight what those unique selling propositions are and why that ideal customer persona should be connected with that message with the end goal of converting those users. Next one is be able to understand your timelines. Make sure they're realistic. Same goes for your budgets. Make sure you have preferably an understanding of what your budget is for the campaigns or for the specific channels you're going to use, but at the same time be able to understand what the budget is for particular peak seasons within your industry. So if you're an e-commerce brand, obviously Black Friday, it's going to be a very competitive season. Be able to upweight budgets for that particular season, and then be able to know when to downweight those budgets. If it's an omni-channel strategy focusing for the whole year, you need to be able to know what your budgets are for the whole year, so be able to forecast that. And then another aspect to being able to understand timelines, budgets, understand if we are going to deploy this omni-channel marketing campaign, are there any constraints or blockers that can slow it down or can make make the campaign a failure, be able to note that down and find ways to have a defensive approach to when those things happen. Next one is encompassing all the previous points to a degree. It's be able to map out and connect all the different aspects you need to make this actually happen. This point's focusing specifically on people, so be able to understand which affiliate partners you're going to use, which publishers, which agencies are relevant in terms of the team internally, who do we need to make this happen, why do we need those people, who's going to take responsibility for the key tasks within the team and the external teams as well. More importantly, who is the project manager and how are they keeping up to date with all the different movements of this campaign activation, like be able to understand what that looks like. And it might be you as a digital growth marketer, you might be the project manager of this aspect, or there might be another person. You need to decide who's actually doing that before you even launch this omni-channel campaign. The final point I want to make is be able to accept that this might not work, that it might be a failure. And what that failure translates to is essentially insights, and be able to communicate that to your stakeholders and your teams internally, where you need to communicate the fact that there are some campaigns or there are some channels that won't be effective, but we are not just paying for positive results, we're paying for negative results, because those negative results can be turned into insights for our next campaign and our next omnichannel strategy, so on and so forth. So there's a learning aspect to this whole thing. So if you were given an opportunity to scale a startup, what omnichannel approach or strategy will you deploy? I'd love to know your thoughts. Leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video. Peace.